Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. I'm Matt Hartsky. If you're ready to chase big mule deer this season, this episode is for you. So grab your notebook because this is the most in-depth video I've done to date, and it's filled with mule deer hunting tips I've gathered over the last 33 years hunting them. We're not talking theory, we're talking boots on the ground strategies that work, especially if you're hunting public land, DIY, and want to maximize your odds no matter which tag you've pulled. Whether you're heading out for your very first mule deer hunt or you've been chasing ghosts for years, this episode will walk you through the mindset, gear, terrain, tactics, and seasonal timing that'll help you get closer and maybe even pack one out. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a full season of mule deer hunting. This is going to be your guide from early archery to late rifle. We'll cover terrain breakdowns, how pressure changes deer movement, elevation shifts throughout the season, and how to glass more effectively. Mule deer are smart, wary, and love rough country. So to hunt them right, you need a plan that's just as sharp. In our first segment, I want to make sure you know your mule deer seasons. So let's start with understanding mule deer phases. First things first. Before we even talk about tactics, you need to understand what season you're hunting and how that affects mule deer behavior. There are three main windows for mule deer. Early season, that's that velvet, August, September. Deer are still in their summer pattern, often in bachelor groups, feeding in alpine basins or open ridges. They're visible but extremely wary. This is the best time to glass big bucks consistently. During pre-rut and rut transition, we're getting into early October, maybe all the way through the end of October, bucks begin breaking up from groups and start cruising solo. They'll begin checking does, traveling more, and showing up in new areas. Visibility increases, but so does unpredictability. During the peak rut, after the end of October, bucks throw caution to the wind. They're locked into does, more exposed, and they're vulnerable. But you'll also get more hunting pressure, colder weather, and tougher terrain access. Each phase demands a different approach. You can't treat November deer like September deer, and you're not going to expect to glass November deer migrating and moving with those does like you would in the early season with those bachelor bucks. Let's break down these windows a little further and correlate them to mule deer terrain. You can't kill what you can't find, and mule deer live in some of the most varied terrain in the West. We're talking about high alpine basins above 9,000 feet, all the way down to desert breaks and sagebrush plateaus in late November. But here's what matters. Mule deer don't move randomly. They follow patterns, elevation, pressure, feed, water, weather. Those five things influence nearly every move a mule deer makes. Early season, August and September, elevation is key. In many western states, mature bucks spend summer and early fall in the high country. We're talking 8,000 to 12,000 feet, depending on what kind of mountain range you're in. They're still in bachelor groups, feeding in open alpine basins at dawn and dusk, bedding just below cliffs or tucked in against rock outcroppings midday. You're typically going to find mule deer near consistent water, feeding on lush, high-protein plants like mountain bluebells, clover, and willow shoots. Here's what you need to focus on. Your e-scouting needs to be focused on north and east-facing basins, especially those with scattered timber and access to springs, seeps, and melt-fed creeks. Water is paramount. Look for terrain that combines visibility for glassing with escape cover. Mature bucks rarely bed in the wide open, especially if they've been hunted before. Now, mid-season, getting into October, bucks start breaking out of their bachelor groups and begin to shift downward. This is often referred to as the October lull. It's not because there's a lull in deer activity. It's a lull in hunter success because bucks are harder to pattern. Their elevation starts to drop to the 6,000 to 9,000 foot range as food sources change and pre-rut movement increases. Some things that you can do are focusing on transition zones, ridge lines, benches, and fingers in between summer range and winter range. Bucks start staging here, especially if they're feeding on oak brush, bitter brush, and lower elevation grasses. This is when still hunting, slow glassing, and finding hard to access pockets can really pay off. In late season, we're going to say end of October on, now you're getting into rifle seasons, and most states are in or near the rut. Bucks are covering country. They're looking for does, running ridges, hitting sage flats, and hanging out in canyon bottoms. Deep snow can trigger full migration patterns, pushing deer into wintering areas around 5,000 to 7,000 feet, depending again on the range. Here are some things you can focus on. Make sure that you're trying to glass open country at first light, south-facing slopes, edges of broken cover, and sage-dotted canyons. Look for does first. Bucks will be trailing behind or hanging just above the group, watching and waiting. Be prepared to shoot further and think faster. This time of year, you may only get one quick shot at a moving buck before he's over a ridge and into thick cover and you never see him again. Let's move on to section 2, where we're going to dive into how mule deer use cover, visibility, and wind. Understanding how mule deer use their environment is one of the biggest separators between hunters who consistently find deer and those who spend days hiking around without glassing up a single animal. Let's break this down into 3 critical elements: that cover, that visibility, and the wind. Because mule deer don't just live in that terrain, they use it with intention and precision. First up, let's talk about cover. Mule deer use it like a shield, but not how you think. Mule deer aren't hiding in holes like whitetails. They're using cover in a much more strategic way, and it changes by elevation and hunting pressure. Lower elevation, desert or sage country, they may bed in sparse terrain, brush, juniper, or even under a single rock outcrop. But they're doing that with intent. They bed with a view, usually making sure that that wind is protecting them from behind, and then they're facing out and using their visual acuity to find danger. Often with thermal escape route also there, making sure that they're not just watching or paying attention to that side-to-side weather-based wind, but the up and down thermals. In the high country, above tree line, you're often going to find those bucks bed just below ridge lines where they can watch the basin below while catching wind from above. Sometimes they're 50 yards below the crest of a ridge with a small bench, rock slide, or crumb holes pocket offering cover. The key is they want visual coverage in front and wind protection from behind. That's the mule deer formula. They don't bed deep in timber just for shade. They bed where they have multiple escape routes, a thermal advantage, and the ability to see or hear you coming. So when you're glassing, don't just look into the trees. Look at the transitions, small folds, patches of brush, just below a skyline, shadow pockets. That's where they tuck in. Let's talk about visibility. Mule deer are the ultimate watchers. Mule deer aren't like elk. They're not vocal, they're not curious, they don't walk around looking for a fight. Their first and best defense is vision, and they use it very well. Old bucks, especially those 5 to 7-year-old deer that disappear off the radar for most of the year, live by what they see. They'll sit motionless for hours, scanning ridges, glassing you while you're glassing them. They often bed where they can see you coming before you ever know they're there. That means you need to hunt with the same level of precision. Don't skyline yourself. Don't approach from below. Always assume there's a set of eyes on you, because if you're in good deer country, there probably is. I like to glass from afar before ever stepping into a basin. If I don't see what I'm after, I still assume I'm being watched and move as if the buck is bedded right where I don't expect. It's happened many times. When you enter a mule deer zone, you are not necessarily just the predator. You're entering their field of a seasoned sentry. Their job is to watch. They do it for a living, right? Let's talk about the wind. Mule deer understand thermals better than most hunters. If there's one topic I see new hunters underestimate, it's thermals, understanding that shift in the wind. Mule deer live by them, especially in steep country. In the morning, Cool air sinks, so you get a downward thermal, right? That sinking, that creates a consistent downhill thermal until the sun heats up the slope and flips it. By mid-morning, those thermals shift, and now you have an upslope. And bucks use this cycle religiously. If you would like a full video on thermals and wind and helping you understand those better, I'll link to them up here and in the description. I'll link that video up here for you so that you can better understand those thermals. It's just paramount for elk and mule deer and any other western critter, but it will definitely help you with your mule deer hunting, both glassing and your approach. They'll often feed down into lower pockets at night, using the downhill thermals to detect danger. Then just before daybreak, they climb higher to bed, making sure those upslope winds that kick in later will be in their favor for the day. Old bucks will even reposition in the middle of the day in the wind or sun, or if the wind or sun shifts. You won't hear it, you won't see it necessarily, but typically they're moving in 30-yard patterns or less inside of cover to keep the upper hand. I've seen them shift around one rock following that shade as the day goes on. So that's why I glass all day, especially in bedding areas. One quick shift in sunlight, wind, or pressure, and that ghost of a buck might stand up to reposition, and that's your chance. Here's the mistake. Most hunters only check the wind at the trailhead, or not often enough, and that just means nothing 4 miles away. Use a wind checker constantly. Watch the grass, check the thermals, watch the trees for movement, because the mule deer already are. And when you're stalking, and we'll get into this a whole lot more here in a few minutes, but stop often, recheck your wind, reroute if needed. Thermals are your #1 stalk killer. Ignore them and you'll never even get close enough to take a shot. If you would like to learn more about the wind and thermals, again, check out the video that I've linked here. Let's move on to section 3. In this section, I want you to understand mule deer senses and really how they stay alive. If you want to outsmart a mature mule deer buck, you need to think like one. You've got to understand exactly how they survive, and that means diving deep into how they use their senses. Mule deer don't live to maturity by accident. Their world is built around one goal: detecting and avoiding danger, and that's usually humans and mountain lions, and they are incredibly good at it. Let's talk smell, their primary defense system. Mule deer trust their nose above all else. Their sense of smell is their #1 survival tool, and it's downright elite. They can pick up human scent from over a half mile away in the right conditions. And they don't just smell you, they catalog you. The way your scent drifts and lingers gives them data on your direction, your pace, or your distance, or how recently you passed through. Your tactic? Become obsessed with the wind. This isn't optional, it's essential. Before you glass, before you move, before you set up for a stalk, you need to know exactly where your wind is going and how thermals are behaving. That means use wind indicators constantly. A small puff every few minutes, not just once you leave the truck. Understanding thermals, again, I can't say it enough. Mornings usually pull that air downhill, and then afternoons push it uphill as the sun warms the slopes. But terrain, cloud cover, and time of day can all shift those, so we're constantly checking. Use your e-scouting to plan wind-safe approaches. Always stalk from downwind and know where thermals might betray you as you close in. If your scent gets to a muley before you do, it's over. Mature bucks don't give second chances. They ghost into cover and vanish. Let's talk about sight, wide angles, and movement detection. A mule deer's vision is uniquely situated to detect movement, even at long distances. Their eyes are placed on the sides of their head, giving them a 310-degree field of view that's nearly panoramic. They don't necessarily have high-resolution focus like humans, but they're incredibly good at picking up contrast and motion. That means stillness matters a lot. If you move even slowly when a buck's head is up and scanning, you're done. You've got to freeze completely and hope that and wait until he relaxes. Use shadows, not just cover. Light discipline is underrated. Mule deer see movement better in direct sunlight, so it helps you if you stay in broken light or shade. Avoid the skyline. A silhouette on a ridge, even several hundred yards away, is a red flag for a mule deer, and then he's keeping an eye on that area. Always walk below the crest or on the back side of ridges. Don't underestimate their eyes. Just because they don't see color the way we do, they're tuned in to catch contrast and movement in terrain they've memorized, that they've sat there and watched all the time. That gives them an edge. Unless you take it from them with strategic positioning and patience, they've got one up on you. Let's talk hearing. It's good for a mule deer. It's not their strongest compared to their sense of smell and sight. Mule deer hearing is their third tier of defense, but it still plays a crucial role. They are tuned in to sharp or unnatural sounds, metal on metal, zippers, Velcro, unnatural crunches. What they don't hear well is subtle natural movement, wind-blown leaves, a careful step on soft soil instead of a rock. Your advantage is to mimic nature's rhythm. Slow your steps to match the wind gusts. Step when the wind rustles trees or grasses or dead weeds. Pause when it's dead calm and wait. Avoid gear clunk at all costs. Obviously, we're wanting to tape up buckles, secure straps that could flap in the wind, and go silent everywhere that you possibly can. Every click echoes in the stillness of the mountains. Learn to walk silently. Heel toe rolls, soft landings, and controlled pace. These things matter more than people think. They may not peg you with sound alone, but if a noise makes a mule deer lift his head and your movement confirms the danger, they're gone. Let's move on to section 4, where we'll be diving into e-scouting and learning more about mule deer terrain. If you're not e-scouting for mule deer in 2025, you're already behind. The days of showing up blind and figuring it out with boot leather are long gone. E-scouting doesn't replace boots on the ground scouting, but it sets the foundation so your time in the field is efficiently used and focused. Smart hunters don't wander around, they plan. And this section is about making sure you know exactly what terrain mule deer favor, how to find it from your laptop, and how to build a hunt plan before you even leave home. Here's what mule deer look for in terrain. Mature mule deer, especially bucks, have distinct preferences when it comes to terrain. Their priorities are survival, security, food, and escape. Here's what that means in practical terms. Broken vertical country with lots of folds, benches, and elevation changes. South and east facing slopes for early season bedding. They're going to find warmth and morning sun. North facing slopes and heavy timber for midday bedding in warmer months. They're looking for shade and cooler temps. Cover near open feeding areas, especially during dawn and dusk. It makes it easier for their movement. Glassable country that allows them to see danger coming while staying hidden themselves. Think of it like this. Mule deer prefer to see without being seen and to move without being exposed. Here's how to e-scout mule deer country like a pro. Start with a layering strategy just like you would in the field. Here's the process I use when I'm e-scouting for mule deer. Pick the right mapping tools. Use apps like Go Hunt Maps, OnX, and Google Earth. Make sure you know how to toggle slope, angle layers. It's important for predicting those bedding zones. Use shaded relief and topo lines together. Mark access points, private boundaries, and definitely your water sources. Download offline maps for in-the-field use. Then we need to make sure that you're good at identifying key terrain features. Zoom in and analyze benches and shelves below ridge lines, classic bedding zones. Vegetation transitions. Deer love edge habitat between timber and openings. Finger ridges and cuts, often used as travel routes where they can stay hidden. Drainages and hidden pockets. Spots other hunters overlook. Those might hold deer midday. You're looking for 3 key categories: bedding terrain, feeding terrain, and travel corridors. Mark them all, then start building potential hunt loops and glassing spots around them. Make sure that you study access and pressure points. Mule deer go where people don't, so your e-scouting must include trailheads and obvious access points. Assume anything near a road or trail sees pressure. Anything within a hiking distance and elevation gain, if it takes 3+ miles and 2,000 feet of vertical to get in, that pressure is going to drop significantly. That's where you want to be. Hidden drainages or isolated basins often hold deer that aren't on prime-looking slopes, and they might be tucked away. Layer your potential muley spots with human access points and then filter out the places where it's easiest for most hunters to hit. Create a plan A, B, and C. Don't just mark one area and call it good. The weather, the hunting pressure, and local conditions change fast. Make sure you build a tiered approach. Plan A should include primary glassing ridges and hunt loops that are based on ideal conditions. Plan B might be lower elevations or different slope orientations in case of snow, wind, or pressure. Plan C might include roadless pockets, thick timber, or backup trailheads to access different areas in case A and B are blown out. Each of these should be ready to go offline with your pins marked, elevations noted, and glassing lines planned. Here are some key e-scouting tactics many hunters miss. These high-level tactics that separate average hunters from detail-oriented mule deer killers are going to include studying historical satellite images. Use Google Earth's time slider to view terrain changes, timber growth, and burn regrowth over time. Use 3D mapping extensively. Terrain can lie on a flat map. Tilt and rotate in 3D to visualize how mule deer might move, bed, or evade. Track sun angles for early season hunts. South-facing slopes warm up faster and create thermal lift earlier. This affects bedding and wind. Mark water strategically. Not every drainage has accessible water. Mature bucks know where secluded water is, and so should you. Use topo lines to estimate deer visibility. If a ridge or a bench gives a buck a view of his back trail or lower terrain, he's probably used it before. Mule deer don't make things easy, but they do make things more consistent. And once you know what terrain they favor, e-scouting turns from guesswork into a more dialed plan. This is where your success begins, at home, weeks before season opens. Those long nights on the laptop staring at layers and topography. That's what separates the guys who glass deer from the ones who tag deer. Let's move on to section 5, where we're going to discuss how to plan mule deer hunts across pre-rut, rut, and post-rut phases. Seasonal timing affects everything: movement, behavior, location, and success. Here's how to adapt your hunt across all phases of the rut. You can't hunt mule deer the same way in August as you do in October, and you can't expect a buck in full rut to behave like he does in early fall. Mule deer change with the seasons, and if your strategy doesn't, you'll always be one step behind. In this section, we're going to break down how mule deer behavior shifts across the pre-rut, rut, and post-rut, and exactly how to adjust your tactics, gear, expectations, and so on for each phase. Let's talk pre-rut. Late August to the end of September. Pre-rut is all about predictability. Bucks are still in their summer patterns, living in bachelor groups, hitting consistent feed areas, and bedding in familiar terrain. They aren't fired up yet, but that's exactly why this window is gold for archery and early rifle hunters. Your buck behavior is still going to be grouped into small bachelor herds. They're going to be feeding in the morning and evening, bedding early in the shade in high visibility areas where they can see well. They're going to be maybe a little less alert than in later phases, but still very cautious. Their traveling is predictable in patterns from feed to bed and back. Your best tactics are to e-scout and glass to locate patterns. Bucks are highly patternable in this phase. Use long glassing sessions to pinpoint where they feed, how they travel, and where they bed. Watch from a distance. Stalk with patience. If you spot a buck in the open, don't rush it. Watch where he beds. Remember, most mule deer bed at least twice, if not more. The second and third beds are usually much more tighter, more secure, and perfect for a late morning, early afternoon stalk. Maximize early and late light. Your best window is 30 minutes before and after sunup or sundown for spotting bucks. Be glassing before the sun crests the ridgeline. Use the wind and terrain to your advantage. Thermals are steady in the early season, so plan stalks accordingly. Morning thermals are going to be going downhill, and then as that heat starts to warm up the slopes, you're going to have those rising thermals. Plan for velvet shedding. In some units, bucks shed their velvet during late August and early September, so expect movement and changes in bedding patterns when this occurs. Let's move on to the rut, full-on rut, getting into mid-October to mid-November. When the rut kicks in, mule deer bucks shift gears. Patterns go out the window. Bucks that were invisible for most of the year show up in open meadows with their nose to the ground. It's chaos and opportunity. Your buck behavior is going to show bucks that are actively seeking does, often visible in the daylight. Bucks are going to be pushing does into the open or semi-open terrain where they can keep an eye on them. Their movement happens throughout the day. They're less consistent in specific locations because the bucks are roaming widely. Competing bucks may often show up and fight or push does aggressively. Your best tactics are to glass for does first. Where there are does, there will be bucks. Does lead the location game now. Bucks will find them, often multiple bucks, trailing a single hot doe. Hunt all day. Movement doesn't stop mid-morning like it does in the pre-rut. Bucks may push does all day, bed near them, rise again, harass them again. Glassing at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. is not a waste. It might be your best window. Try to cover more ground. You may need to hike ridges, glass multiple basins, and move frequently. Bucks are nomadic now, so you may need to be as well. Stay flexible. Don't lock in on a single bedding zone. If bucks aren't there, shift to a new group of does or try new elevation bands. The rut scatters deer. Expect more visible activity. This is likely the phase where you're going to see chasing, grunting, and daylight movement even from the mature bucks. Lastly, let's talk about the post-rut. We're talking probably mid-November on. If you're lucky enough to get to hit this time, the rut is winding down. Bucks are worn out. They've been chasing does, fighting other bucks, and burning calories like crazy. And now they vanish again. They get secluded. They're trying to be alone, secretive, and focused on recovery. Your buck behavior is going to see bucks who are mostly solitary. Some may be still trailing late does or does that were missed during the first rut, but these bucks are mostly going to be extremely wary, and they're smart and skittish. They bed deeper, they're more secluded, and they're finding that secluded cover. They feed at odd times, often at night or just before dark, focused on conserving energy and staying safe. Your best tactics are to still hunt or slow glass. Focus on the thick pockets of cover near food. You may have to glass into timber edges, cuts, and deep draws. You're going to be glassing from mid-morning to midday. Occasionally, you'll catch a tired buck slipping out to feed and catch some sun in a secluded opening. Look for shadows moving or ear flicks. Tiny details matter. Remember, post-rut bucks trust their nose more than ever. Sloppy wind discipline is going to ruin opportunities. Rushing into draws are just going to be you're just going to be busting out bucks. Planning your hunt around the rut phases isn't smart. It's essential. Every single thing about mule deer hunting changes depending on when you're hunting. If you're not adjusting your tactics for that week's specific behavior, you're behind the curve. By learning these patterns, you can go from hope I see one to I know where there's probably deer and I know how to kill one. Let's move on to section 6 and talk about mule deer pressure and their response, how bucks react to hunting pressure and what to do about it. Mule deer might seem casual or even predictable during early season patterns, but once they feel hunting pressure, everything changes, especially for mature bucks. One of the biggest mistakes I see hunters make is assuming that mule deer, even the big ones, will continue to act the same way once the season opens, and they just don't. And if you want to consistently find mature bucks, you have to understand what pressure does to them and how to adjust your game accordingly. Let's break it down a little further. Mule deer don't just leave, they shift. Unlike elk, which often bolt and move long distances, pressured mule deer bucks tend to shift rather than leave an area completely. They rarely abandon their core range, especially older deer who know where the feed, water, cover, and safety zones are. But they will absolutely change how they move through that terrain. Instead of using obvious trails, they'll ghost through side cover, shadow lines, or finger ridges that allow them to move unseen. They'll bed in steeper, nastier cuts, especially in places that are difficult to glass. Think short visibility folds, dense timber edges, and under ledges with multiple escape routes. Here's a tactic you could use. After the first few days of pressure, shift your glassing to secondary terrain. It's less obvious, harder to reach benches, slopes with broken terrain, or edges of burned areas and old growth that offer concealment without being fully timbered. Focus on shady spots and wind-protected edges where bucks can stage and bed with visibility and escape in mind. Pressured mule deer move less during daylight and start feeding almost entirely at night. The old high visibility movements like crossing open saddles at first light, those become more rare. They'll often move only in the first and last 15 minutes of shooting light, and mature bucks will often stay bedded all day unless absolutely necessary. Here's a tactic you could use. Your glassing game has to go next level. Set up well before daylight. Glass transition routes during the first hint of light, and then glass likely bedding zones all day, patiently, methodically, and with intent. Look for flicks of an ear, antler tips in shadow, or a slight shift of a body. Train your eye to see parts of a deer. You're not just looking for the whole deer. Mature bucks find micro habitats. When things heat up, literally or figuratively, big mule deer bucks often retreat into what I call micro habitats. These are tight pockets of terrain that provide 360-degree cover, wind protection, and visibility. Examples include a north-facing rock chute with sparse timber, a tight creek drainage with thick alder or aspen bands, a bench under a rim rock shelf with wind eddies and shade. They'll hunker in places that are tough to glass and even tougher to approach. But if you know to look for them and plan your stalks accordingly, these become kill zones. Here's a tactic you could use. Study your topo maps and aerials for unlikely cover. Micro benches, finger ridges, vegetation lines that aren't obvious from a distance. Glass from multiple angles and scout them aggressively before the pressure hits. Once the season starts, those tucked away zones are your best bet for mature bucks. Hunting pressure doesn't make a big buck disappear. It just makes them harder to find. If you anticipate how mule deer respond to human pressure and adjust your tactics accordingly, you'll be in the game long after the rest of camp is sleeping or heading home. Let's move on to section 7, where we're going to dig into terrain tactics for high country, rolling hills, and desert units. One of the biggest mistakes many hunters make is trying to use the same strategy across every terrain. But mule deer behave differently depending on where they live. High alpine basins, sage-covered foothills, or wide open desert flats. If you want consistent success, you need to adapt your tactics to match the terrain. Let's break down the 3 most common landscapes and how to hunt each one effectively. First up, high country mule deer tactics. Think alpine basins, rocky ridges, scattered timber up around 9,000 feet plus. High country mule deer are often the most predictable, but they're also the hardest to get to. Bucks that live in alpine terrain tend to summer in the same basins year after year. They bed high, feed early, and bed again by mid-morning. The good news? You can glass them from a mile away and pattern them. The challenge? Getting to them without blowing them out. Here are some tactics you could use. Get high and stay high. Your best advantage is elevation. Set camp high so you can glass first light without hiking miles in the dark. Glass into basins from above. Mule deer rarely bed on top of ridges. They drop just over the top on the north or east facing slopes. From above, you'll see feeding areas, bedding transitions, and escape routes. Mornings are gold. These deer feed openly in the first 60 to 90 minutes of daylight. Once they bed, they're locked down tight and almost invisible. Stalks require patience and precision. Plan your route with wind, shade, and cover in mind. High country deer have a wide field of view and a sharp sixth sense for pressure. Watch your thermals. Again, can't say it enough. Morning thermals are headed down until that sun hits the basin and starts moving the thermals up. And oftentimes in that high country, they can shift erratically. Don't blow a stalk with a hunt that isn't planned around that morning thermal shift. High country hunts are usually best in early season or pre-rut. Velvet bucks are especially patternable in early September before snow or weather pushes them lower. Next up, let's talk about your rolling hills and sage flats. Think foothills, sagebrush terrain, maybe some broken timber, mid-elevation basins. This middle ground is where a lot of public land mule deer live and where a lot of hunters struggle. These deer live in more accessible terrain, so they've seen pressure. They're cagey. They move less in daylight, and they use subtle terrain features to stay alive. Here are some tactics you could use. Use knobs and micro ridges to glass. You won't have the extreme elevation of high country terrain, so look for small glassing points that give you visibility into drainages, sage flats, and transitions. Time your glassing carefully. Early and late light is everything. Bucks in this terrain might feed for 20 minutes and bed down for the day. Don't miss your window. Focus on fingers and folds. Mule deer in rolling hills bed in cuts, shallow draws, and behind low profile brush. From a distance, they disappear. You got to use your tripod, use that good glass, and take your time. The wind can be trickier. Without big features to guide thermals, wind tends to swirl. Play the edges, stay back when glassing, and move slow when stalking. Don't overlook small patches. One 30-yard patch of brush might hold a mature buck all day, and they can completely disappear. Mature deer in this terrain are masters at hiding in plain sight. These zones are often where rut activity starts to pick up, especially late October and November. Bucks may cruise the edges of sage flats looking for does, be glassing all day during the peak rut. Finally, let's talk about desert and open country mule deer. Think low elevation, wide open basins, mesquite, cactus, or badland terrain. Desert mule deer are their own animal. They survive in sparse cover, brutal heat, and often on minimal water. The key here is not blowing your stock. They'll see you coming from a mile away if you don't use the terrain right. Here are some tactics you could use. Optics rule. You'll spend 80% of your time glassing, 20% hunting. This big open country means big glass, using high-powered binos and spotters from a tripod. Find high ground. Even in flat terrain, any rise, a butte, a rock outcrop, a small rim can give you just enough angle to spot bedded deer in the open. Focus on shade and thermal pockets. Deer will bed where they can find cool ground and breeze. Rock piles, mesquite shadows, or even single cholla brush might be their only refuge from the sun. Mark deer, then plan all-day stalks. Desert stalks require so much patience. Often you glass deer in the morning and wait 4 to 6 hours for them to move or reposition. Don't force it. Use topography, even subtle dips. Crawl behind washes, dry creek beds, or sage rises. You might be doing a lot of belly crawling in the desert. Desert deer will bust you from a mile away if you skyline or move without cover. Evening movement is limited. Bucks might get up just before sunset, takes 20 steps or so, and bed down again. You've got to try to be in position early and anticipate their feeding direction. Desert hunts are often better during post-rut and late season when bucks are solo and feeding more to recover from the rut. Don't let the open space fool you. This is one of the hardest places to kill a mature muley. Try to keep a terrain-driven mindset. It's a little bit of a shift. Each one of these terrain types calls for a different pace, different expectations, and a different mental prep for it. High country, it's about patience, vertical legs, and stalking with precision. Rolling hills, it's about reading subtle terrain and glassing harder than anyone else. In the desert, it's about discipline, long days, longer glassing, and surgical stalks. The key is to build your plan around the terrain, not force your favorite tactic into country that doesn't support it. When you master terrain-specific strategies, you're going to stop hunting mule deer and start hunting mature bucks that other hunters overlook. Let's move on to section 8, where we're going to discuss everyone's favorite part, stalking mule deer, movement, terrain, and timing. Once you've spotted a shooter buck, everything changes. Now the game shifts from glassing to getting close. And stalking mule deer, especially mature bucks, requires an entirely different mindset. It's slow, it's strategic, and it's where most hunters blow it. I've spent 4 hours covering 100 yards before. A successful stalk doesn't start when you leave your glassing point. It starts before you ever stand up. Let's break it down. Watch longer before you move. This is where 90% of stalks fall apart. The impatience to get going. Hunters spot a buck. They get excited and immediately hustle into position without fully reading the situation. But before you rush in, you'll almost always blow the stalk if you're not taking your time to check it out, either because the deer moves, he beds in a different spot, or get your wind before you even get close. Here's some tactics you can use. Once you spot a buck, watch him as long as possible. Is he feeding or bedding? What's his body language? Is he alert or relaxed? What's the wind doing now? And what will it do in 2 hours? If he's still up and moving, wait. Let him bed before you plan your stalk. A bedded buck is much, much more predictable. A feeding buck, who knows? Wind is everything. That means understanding the thermals and the prevailing winds. You've heard me say it a dozen times now. You've got to forget distance, forget terrain. If the wind isn't right, don't go. Play that first. You could have the perfect stalk lined up, 50 yards, wide open, no obstacles, but if the wind swirls once, it's over. Thermals rise in late morning, right? So when they're bedded down that late morning time, you've got to pay attention for that. But also pay attention for the terrain shifts. The shade lines, the cliffs, the creek beds can cause those thermals to roll and swirl unexpectedly. Here's a tactic you can use. Use wind checkers constantly. Know when prevailing winds are overriding the thermals. Don't stalk at the deer. Stalk to a position where the wind will stay stable for at least an hour. If the wind's marginal, back out and wait. Killing a big buck solo isn't about speed. It's so much about control. Make sure you plan the route like you're already packing out. You need to see the entire stalk before you take a single step. That means understanding where he is now, where you need to get to, your shooting spot, what obstacles lie in between you and the buck, how you're going to avoid being skylined or exposed or too noisy. Most stalks fail because guys get almost there and realize there's no more cover, or they cliff themselves out of a good angle. Here's a tactic you could use. Use your map app to mark your current glassing spot. Pin the buck's location and likely bedding spot. Drop 2 to 3 potential approach pins. Check your slope angle and sun position. Plan it like it's a mission. Then go execute with discipline. Also, use terrain features to your advantage. Mule deer are visual animals. They rely heavily on their eyes to catch movement and shape, especially in that open terrain. So your stock needs to use every available advantage. Ridges, cuts, rock shelves, brush lines, shadows. Here's a tactic you could use. Stay below the skyline. Move low on side hills or all the way down in ditches. Time your movement with cloud cover when the buck's head is turned or down. That, stalking when there's shadows is much more effective than stalking in direct light. Avoid a direct approach. Use angles that keep brush or terrain between you and that buck until the final movement. If you have to cover open ground, do it low, slow, and when the wind is picking up and making noise, and when it's steady and you know exactly what the wind and thermals are doing. And always, always have a backup escape route if things change. You're going to make sure that you're stalking slow, then go slower. You probably heard the phrase, move at a snail's pace. That's still probably too fast when we're hunting those smart bucks. Mature bucks watch the world. Their eyes are tuned for unnatural motion. One wrong step, a fast turn of the shoulder, an upright profile, a rustle in the wrong place, and they vanish without a sound. Here's a tactic you could use. Crouch or crawl the last 100 yards if needed. It's not uncommon. Place feet carefully to avoid snapping twigs or brush or rolling little rocks. Keep your bow or rifle low to the side, not over your back. Every 10 steps, stop, glass ahead, reassess the terrain. 10 is probably the maximum I would suggest. As you get closer to that buck, it's going to be fewer steps. I've gone through periods of hours where I took one step, waited for the wind to pick up, took a step. Or maybe the wind just wasn't steady enough, blowing the direction I needed it to, waited, took a step, rechecked, made sure everything was good. The best stalks are often super boring. That's a good thing. If your stalk is boring, it means you're being careful. In your final shot setup, we've got to make sure we make it count. Let's say you've made it to 30 yards. You're close. Now is not the time to rush. Bucks may be bedded tight and the shot window could be narrow. If you're bow hunting, range multiple landmarks quietly. Get into shooting position before he stands. Be ready to draw slowly when he rises, not after he's up. You've got to time it. If you're rifle hunting, use your pack or a bipod for rock solid support. Dial your turret ahead of time. Know your shooting lane and confirm your backstop. Here's a tactic you could use when you're ready. Visualize the shot before it happens. If you don't like your angle or position, back out, change it. A low percentage shot can turn a perfect stalk into a disaster. Remember, if the stalk blows up, don't panic. Even when everything's perfect, things can fall apart. A swirling wind, a flick of movement, or a missed cue, and the buck explodes out of his bed. Try not to chase blindly. Don't sprint, and don't swear that the season's over. You're going to want to watch where he goes. Bucks often rebed within 200 to 400 yards, especially in early season or if they didn't catch your scent directly. Mark where he disappeared and loop wide to regain a glassing angle. I broke a sight off a muzzleloader several years ago and ended up missing a buck at close range that I thought was too close to miss, even with my damaged sight, and bumped him out of there, was sure he was gone, watched where he went. He bedded down within 30 minutes, got in there in the afternoon with a different setup, and ended up killing that buck. Patience kills more bucks than adrenaline and getting overexcited ever will. Stalking mule deer isn't just a skill, it's a mindset. It requires calm, under pressure, relentless patience, and total discipline in how you move, think, and act. The difference between a blown stalk and a successful arrow or bullet often comes down to how slow you're willing to go and how well you stick to the plan. Your goal isn't just to get close, it's to get close without ever being noticed. Let's wrap it up with some thoughts on mule deer hunting, success, grit, and backbone. If you made it this far, then here's the final truth I'll leave you with. Mule deer hunting will test you, not just your shooting, not just your glassing. It'll test your patience, your grit, your focus, and your ability to bounce back after 5 straight days of blown stalks and empty glassing sessions. You're going to doubt yourself. You'll second guess your e-scouting. You'll look at a wide open basin and wonder if you're wasting your time. And in those moments, the ones who succeed, the ones who fill muley tags, aren't always the best shooters, the most experienced guys on the mountain. They're the ones who refuse to quit. They're the ones who take one more look, make one more stalk, hike one more ridge before dark. They're the ones who take their mistakes personally and use them as fuel instead of excuses. So if this episode helped you, don't just hit like. I'd love for you to visit backboneunlimited.com, join Team Backbone, subscribe to the podcast, drop a comment for me, share this with a buddy who lives for this like you do. Hunt hard, become a mule deer killing machine, never settle.